Hey guys, welcome to LALoveCreative, and today we're talking about the Sony FX9, my first impressions of the camera, and should you consider it if you're looking for a cinema camera. Now, I've been really excited about the Sony FX9. I've been tracking every video that's coming out about the camera. I've tracked all the reviews and, user reviews and all of that stuff. I'm really excited about this camera, and there's a couple reasons why. For one, it's a full frame cinema camera. I've been waiting for a full frame cinema camera since the days of the Canon 5D Mark II. So why full frame versus Super 35? Well, for me, I'm a big fan of having the full readout of the sensor. I'd love for my lenses to be the right focal length when I put them on the camera. For example, if I put a 35mm lens on a full frame camera, it's 35mm lens. There's no crop. This camera in particular has a 6K sensor that downscales that image to 4K, similar to the A7 III, but with way more dynamic range. What's great about actually taking that 6K image and downsampling it to 4K is smaller files, and your 4K is gonna have a higher quality. I do hope that in the future the FX9 will actually implement some type of 6K recording in the camera, but who knows. Now, I had a chance to shoot with the camera. I used my girlfriend and also my sister to do some test shots with the camera. I was so excited that as soon as one of them was available to rent, I just ran for it and was like, I gotta check out this camera. If you're like me, you're looking for a production camera, something that you can use on commercials, documentaries, fashion videos, stuff when you need a higher end camera. And that's why I think the FX9 is going to really excite a lot of filmmakers. For one, the image quality is amazing. I think this image is on par with the Canon C500. I think it's on par with the FS7. I think it's on par, better than the FS7 actually. I think it's on par with the Canon C500, which I've seen videos online where they've compared them, and that camera is $16,000. I think people are gonna be really excited about the Sony FX9 on higher end productions. Also, for one-man bands, I think this camera is going to be great for DPs that shoot things by themselves. Now, the Sony FX9 has two main color profiles. You either can shoot in a Cinetone, which is a baked-in, almost color-corrected image, or you can shoot an S-Log3, which is going to give you the full dynamic range of this camera. Sony is on it right now. One of the things that held me back from the FS7 Mark II was if I'm shooting an interview and people are going back and forth, their autofocus wasn't reliable, and I love actually relying on that when I'm doing interviews or stuff like that. I think what Sony's doing right now with autofocus is totally killing it compared to Canon. The autofocus on this camera has all these different functions. It's very similar to the A7 III, where you can kind of mess with the responsiveness, you can mess with different types of modes, and I think it works great. I was shooting at 1.8, I was shooting at 2.8, and it was just really holding focus really well. One of the things I don't like about the autofocus when it comes to this camera, and also it has something to do with the camera itself, is the fact that it doesn't have a touch screen. If this camera had more of a touchscreen interface, it would make it easier so you could actually click a part where you actually wanted to focus, or you can move your focus point. I think that would be really, really cool. Now, the battery life on this camera wasn't that amazing. I will say that I was getting around 2 hours maybe with the battery. But when it comes to a cinema camera, you're going to have to rig it out. You're going to have to figure out battery solutions. If you want a better battery, it's probably gonna mean a suckier image. So unless it just makes some groundbreaking moves. So you just get over that. Just get over it. When it comes to slow motion, this camera shoots 120 frames per second in 1080p. It shoots 4K 60p, which is amazing too. What's great is the 4K 60p, you can actually still use the autofocus on the camera. However, if you're shooting the 120 frames per second, there is no autofocus, which is not a big deal. One of the biggest things I will say I'm not a big fan of with this camera is the ergonomics. I love the button placements. I love the customizable buttons. I actually love the way all the layout is. It's just my only gripe with it is putting it on my shoulder wasn't comfortable. That's not a big deal. You can rig this camera out, and this camera is meant to be rigged out. Another issue that a lot of people do not like when it comes to Sony cameras, that cliche problem that everyone makes fun of Sony cameras for. They're always like, the menu. But I will say, this camera, I wanted to defend the menu on this camera, but it's a menu, but there's a lot of customization in this camera, and that is the saving grace. Low light. I love the fact that this camera has dual ISO technology. I think by putting dual ISO on a production camera, you are really helping out the smaller end productions and also the higher end productions. I think the dual ISO on this camera works really well. It has a base ISO of 800 and one at 4000, and they're both very clean. I would say it's on level of like the A7 III, which is great for an actual production cinema camera. I think you're gonna be really pleased with the low light capabilities of this camera, and once again, that's something that Sony has beat Canon on. Canon used to be a low light camera, and now Sony is really taking it on, even on their cinema lineup. I think you should consider the FX9. For us, we're in pre-production for a documentary series that's a travel series, and we're trying out different cameras, trying to figure out which camera we should take, which camera should we possibly purchase, and I'm pretty sure the Sony FX9 is going to be Netflix approved too. So if you want something that's kind of future-proof, you might want to upgrade to something like a FX9. My major con with this camera that a lot of people are probably already aware of is it's very expensive. Now, I think it's affordable when it comes to other cinema cameras. It's $11,000 just for the body, with a couple lenses, with a couple batteries, memory cards, a shoulder rig. You're looking at like a $15,000 to $16,000 camera. However, the Canon C500 Mark II, which is an awesome camera too, starts at $16,000. Now that's all I have to say about the Sony FX9. Let me know if you have any questions about the Sony FX9 or photography or videography, and I will see you next time. See you later.